Rock here from the Small Business Buyer, and I'm going to talk today about the difference between real estate and buying a business in terms of cap rates. And so I'm going to start out with my famous Insta-Deal program here and put down what the typical configuration is for buying a business. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the real estate. A piece of real estate that's at the same cost. For example, right here we've got a price tag of a typical business of $500,000. All right, that's what the price is because that's what the components add up to. Now, what would that look like? That would look like a sales number of, guess a little bit, maybe $1 million, maybe $1 million in sales, reconstructed cash flow of $150,000. That's typical for $1 million business, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. And what we're assuming is that the 150 gets you a $500,000 purchase price, which might be around 3x. Okay, so in that scenario, you're going to be pulling together numbers with an equity amount of $100,000. You're going to be pulling together those numbers to get yourself a $500,000 deal. And what will that get you in terms of owner's comp? For salary, it'll get you starting out at around $50,000. At least that's what it has here. And how do I get that? Well, I have to know that I can make some money at the end of the day. So a net cash flow of $37,000 after debt service is quite adequate. Now, I'm not saying that in every case you're going to get that. All right. I've put in here a mortgage. All right. Instead of an actual bank loan. So a mortgage is a 15-year 4% deal, which reduces the cash flow down to $18,000 a year, which is very low. And I'm not saying we're going to get that because we don't have a piece of real estate in this company. It's just a company. All right, so we're not doing real estate yet. This $200,000 probably is going to be more like a 60-month deal rather than a 180-month deal. What does that mean? It means the bank will let me have this loan over 5 years, not over 15 years like a mortgage. And that's because it's a business loan and not a real estate loan. So what's the net effect of that? Well, if you have $1 million sales business and you have reconstructed cash flow of 150,000, you've got owner's comp. This is your salary of $50,000, leaving $100,000 to pay debt service. And what do you have left after debt service? You have $11,000. It's almost a break-even proposition the first year. And this is what buying a business does. It gives you enough money to pay yourself and break even the first year. Now, what's interesting about this is that the multiples up here will give you the cap rates. Okay, the cap rates. What's a cap rate? Cap rate is really a multiple in reverse. Okay, we usually talk about three multiples. That means your 150 times 3, that's your reconstructed cash flow times 3, equals your purchase price. All right, if that's a 3 multiple that you're going to get. And in this case, 500,000 is kind of close to a 3 multiple, but it's obviously in between a 3 and a 4 multiple. But the reverse of that, the 3x, is 3 divided by 100, which is 33%, which is your cap rate, okay? And in a 4x, it would be 25%. That would be your cap rate, all right? In other words, you're generating 25% in return off of 100% investment, okay? If you invest $100,000, you're generating 25% in return. Okay, and that essentially means in this case, you're for every $500,000, you're generating thereabouts $150,000. Now, these cap rates matter because you're going to want to watch them just as you do the multiples on every deal. You're going to want to watch the multiples, watch the cap rates. Now, we talk about multiples in the business world when we're buying businesses, but we don't talk about multiples really when we're talking about real estate investments, and that's what I want to go through next. All right, what you have here is a 3x. That's a 33% cap rate. Well, in the real estate world, cap rates are much different. I would say different. In other words, instead of having a $150,000 at 3x, giving you a $500,000 price tag, you're more likely going to have 150,000 at 10x, giving you a million five price tag on a piece of valuable real estate. And I'll show you how that works in a minute. Okay, now I'm back, and I've changed the numbers a little bit. What I've done is I've made this into a real estate deal. Okay, how have I done that? Well, for one thing, I can pretty much omit the sales because the sales are not important in this example. But what is important is the reconstructed cash flow, or as they call in real estate circles, the net operating income. All right, and this could be the net operating income after expenses. So you have this amount left over for um, debt service, and you come out with about the same number as you do with the business. The only difference is that the cash flow started out quite a bit lower because our cap rates are at 10% and not 33%, or 10x rather than 3x, which means that the real estate typically is a lot pricier uh, per dollar of investment than the business, any comparable businesses, for obvious reasons. The real estate piece can be rented out almost all the time without too much risk, whereas the business has a lot of risk, and you're going to micromanage a business, whereas you aren't going to have that much management responsibility in a piece of real estate that you can rent out. Now, I'll go on to say that you will have as much as $75,000, okay, out of a $500,000 piece of property, which may be less than 10x, and the cap rate may be higher, but nevertheless, you're still scraping by at $39,000, and this is kind of the amount that's left over for management, such as a salary to the new owner. Now, is it realistic to get 75,000 out of a $500,000 piece of property? Yes, it is. It could be a lower price, and you would have a 15 cap rate, 15% cap rate rather than a 10% cap rate. And the 10% cap rates can go down lower than 10%. You can have higher prices on real estate than 10 times, 10x. But those that depends on the real estate. And the real estate, if it's top quality in a beautiful area, sure, the multiples can be very high. But in a typical situation where you have a $500,000 piece of real estate on a small business or maybe a small mixed-use property, you will have the ability to rent that property fairly quickly, but the actual numbers that generate will barely be enough to cover your manager's salary, and it's more of an investment than it is a job. And this is precisely why we don't really want real estate in our business transactions, because it has high value but low cash flow. And we're all about cash flow when it comes to buying businesses or any other investment. So we'll let the real estate guys deal with the low cash flow on the properties, and we'll take the cash flow from the business. Thank you. So when I look at buying a business, I always make sure that the rental income, and I always want to rent it, I don't necessarily want to buy the real estate, but the rental income is low enough to make the value of the property justified. In other words, I'm going to be renting it for $75,000 a year. Okay, I better know that the multiple and the value of that real estate reflects a conservative cap rate. And I wouldn't want to go above 75,000 a year in rental. I might want to kick it down and maybe start out at $40,000 a year and make an offer to the seller to boot it up year after year up to 75 over time. So that's today's lesson for on real estate and businesses as to the value and the cap rates.